Welcome back to Malden's Revolution. I'm Mark Lenehan. 250 years ago today, on August 16th, 1775, Captain Eleazer Lindsey is punished for his cowardice at Malden. 10 days ago, Captain Eleazer Lindsey and most of his company from the Continental Army had fled and abandoned their posts when the British landed troops in Malden. Before retreating back across the Mystic, the British were able to burn the Penny Ferry building, which was the only direct transport link between Malden and Charlestown. One account has Captain Lindsey retreating from the scene so quickly that he fled faster than the women and the children who were also on the scene. Shortly after this, he is placed under arrest by one of Washington's highest-ranking subordinates, General Charles Lee. Those of you who are familiar with the musical Hamilton, you might remember General Charles Lee. History doesn't go that well for him, but that video is a few years away. Since the British first attacked Malden 10 days ago, there have been two more incidents of note which have occurred. First, on August 10th, many of the officers under the command of Colonel Samuel Garish, the ones who are stationed at Medford, Malden, and Chelsea, they have written directly to George Washington complaining that they haven't been paid. And then on August 13th, 1 week after the first British attack against Malden, the British attack again, but this time cannon fire from Malden is able to prevent them from landing. And one account says that several wounded British soldiers were afterwards transported to Boston. To me, one of the strangest aspects of this whole 10-day period is that none of the accounts mention Benjamin Blaney, Naylor Hatch, or Daniel Waters, who's in charge of our artillery, at all. Now, this might be because our only real account of this 10-day period is from Colonel Loammi Baldwin, who is the second in command of Garish's regiment. So Malden's men aren't under his command, so maybe he's just trying to stay in his own lane. But to me, it's a little strange that these incidents that occur at Malden, involving Malden soldiers and Malden cannon, don't mention Malden. After his arrest, Captain Lindsey is court-martialed, and his trial is presided over a man who will become one of the most famous generals of the American Revolution, Brigadier General Nathaniel Greene. Captain Lindsey is found guilty of cowardice, and he is cashiered out of the Army. 3 days later, Lindsey's commanding officer, Colonel Samuel Garish, who had behaved so dishonorably at the Battle of Bunker Hill, he is also found guilty of dishonorable conduct, and he is also kicked out of the Army, but not because of his conduct at Bunker Hill. Specifically, he was found guilty of conduct unbecoming an officer at a place called Sewell's Point, which is actually on the Charles River. It's today Kenmore Square, and there he told his men to hide behind their fortifications and not fire back. And that, in combination with his behavior at Bunker Hill, resulted in him getting kicked out of the Army, which means he actually has the dubious distinction of being both the first colonel commissioned in the Massachusetts Army and also the first colonel kicked out of the Continental Army. Colonel Garish is publicly humiliated, but he gets a soft landing. In 1776, his hometown of Newbury elects him to the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. Captain Lindsey, on the other hand, little is recorded about him until he dies in 1783. His family's burial plot in Lynn is now a lovely open space called Lakeshore Park in today's Peabody, Massachusetts. Between a fishing dock and a playground is a gravesite, but it's a curious gravesite. First of all, this is clearly a modern-day grave. The Army must have placed this in the 20th century, but the Army also seems to have confused him with a different soldier. You can see that it says Lieutenant Colonel Eleazer Lindsey. Well, there was a Lieutenant Colonel Eleazer Lindsey, but he was from New Jersey and he served honorably. Captain Eleazer Lindsey, our Eleazer Lindsey, however, was a coward who was kicked out of the Army almost exactly 4 months after Lexington and Concord. But while I was filming at the gravesite, I was struck with the importance of distinguishing between honoring someone and remembering someone. Because if we only learn about a war's heroes, we'll delude ourselves into thinking that in times of crisis, we will all behave as heroes. And we know that that's simply not true. There are lessons to be learned from great officers like General Nathaniel Greene and Lieutenant Colonel Loami Baldwin. But if we're humble and honest, we can also learn lessons from bad officers like Samuel Garish and Eleazer Lindsey. The inability to find good officers will plague George Washington for the rest of the war. Only a few weeks till fall, which means the return of Bell Rock Cemetery tours and many more Patriot profiles and history-making days ahead. As always, feel free to leave questions and curiosities in the comments. We're going to need them for our next Instagram Live. See you soon.